Everybody ready? You got to pay attention to this. It's only a minute long.
If it's so
Turn it loud.
volatile, so dangerous in a dentist's hands,
You can start it back over.
how on earth can it be safe in our mouths?
Ollie, you got to understand how amalgam really works. If it's in a free form, the mercury that is in the amalgam is dangerous. But when it forms with the copper, the tin, the zinc, and the silver that make up the amalgam filling, it becomes a stable compound at that time. Once it is mixed and placed in a patient's mouth, it is a stable compound, and it does not constitute a risk.
Once it hardens,
Correct.
it's safe.
Right.
What do you do with your scrap amalgam?
What we do in our own practice is we keep it in a jar that has glycerin in the jar. We pull the scrap in there and put a top on it. So it is not exposed in any way. It's in an airtight jar all the time.
Why? Given
That is the recommended way of taking care of it in a dental office. That is what's been recommended by the scientists. So that's the way we do it.
But if it's so perfectly safe in this combined state.
But Marley, you got to understand, when we're saving this stuff, we've got a big jar of it. You got to realize I'm in that office 5 days a week with this material. I do not want to go in there with an open container like that. I want to be as safe as I can.
You guys caught that, right? He was just asking, so if it's so safe, what do you do with the extra stuff? And he walked right into it because he couldn't answer that question, you know? So that alone, and that scene, I'm telling you, if you go look up that video, you'll find the episode, but that particular scene is gone. I think because it was so damning. Okay. I hope you'll enjoy this. There's 6 videos. They're all pro-fluoride videos. I did that on purpose because I want you to see this. This first one's the longest one. It's a little under 2 minutes. All the rest are very short, okay? But let's have some fun because I think you'll enjoy this.
Fluoride in our community water is a good thing. Here's why. Community water fluoridation is considered one of 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. In fact, over 100 national health organizations recognize the public health benefits of fluoride in our community water.
It's so important that we prevent tooth decay, which can be a very serious disease if it's not treated. Water fluoridation helps adults as well as children. We have evidence on that. People are keeping their teeth longer, thank goodness.
It's effective.
I'm a mom, I'm a dental hygienist, and I'm also a researcher. And I like to wear all 3 hats. I always try to find the best science and evidence when I'm trying to make decisions about my children. And fluoride, especially through community water fluoridations, is one of those no-brainers.
It's safe.
Fluoride in community water is absolutely safe. It's been used for over 70 years to help prevent tooth decay.
Thousands of Americans are being misinformed about the safety and benefits of fluoridation. Now, if they go to a credible source, if they go to CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, if they go to the American Dental Association, if they go to ILikeMyTeeth.org, when they go to credible sources, they get the facts, the true science, and information.
I have absolutely no concern about community water fluoridation harming the children. I'm actually more concerned about not having fluoride.
Fluoride is natural. It's a fact that fluoride is naturally present in soil, rivers, lakes, and even the ocean. Water fluoridation is the addition of fluoride up to the recommended level for preventing tooth decay. It's similar to fortifying other foods and beverages, like fortifying salt with iodine, milk with vitamin D, orange juice with calcium, and bread with folic acid. It's preventive.
Why do you need to treat the disease when you can prevent it? It makes sense to prevent disease.
Okay, so when I first watched it, I wanted to interrupt every 10 seconds and make my point, but I just played it through. I don't like when they say fluoride is like those things. Those are all essential nutrients, right? Iodine, vitamin D, calcium, folic acid. Those are essential nutrients. Fluoride is not. So that's a clever argument that they try to do, and if you don't pay attention, it sounds good. And saying something's been around for 70 years is not a scientific explanation for something. So this is kind of the stuff that you're going to see on these videos, the same thing. There's never been a study to show that it's not effective. There's never been this. It's always been around. Those are the things you got to look for. Those aren't scientific terms. Okay, so I'm going to go right to the most recent thing that I have. This was just in December. So Philip Grandjean, who you guys probably remember, he's a Danish scientist, but he also works at Harvard. And he did a study a few years ago where he was talking about neurotoxicity, and he included fluoride as an element that might have these effects. And of course, mainstream medicine and dentistry came out against him and said, you can't say that, that's not true. So lo and behold, we had several studies, which I'll get into in a second, from Canada, Mexico, and other places. And basically, this was just a review of those things. And look at his statement here. The recent epidemiological results support the notion that elevated fluoride intake during early development can result in IQ deficits that may be considerable. In fact, as high as 4.5 points in boys. So recognition of neurotoxic risks is necessary when determining the safety of fluoride, contaminated drinking water, and fluoride use for preventive dentistry purposes. Now, I'm going to differentiate in a second between topical and systemic, but the point is still the same here, okay? Fluoride is not this panacea that we've been told. And listen, lest anybody think that I was always anti-fluoride, when I started practicing in '93, I did what I was taught. I was pro-fluoride. I told patients to use a fluoridated toothpaste. I thought water fluoridation was great. I even wrote my first article that I ever wrote in some local rag, and it was called Sealed for Health. And I talked about sealants and fluoride. So shortly thereafter, though, certainly by '95, I was done with that. But my point is that I, too, believed what most of you in this room might believe right now. So just open eyes, open mind right now, and I'm going to show you things to make it really clear. So this is one of the articles, again, very recent, August of last year, one of the articles that he was reviewing, okay? And this was probably the one that you guys heard about most recently, because Rivka Green did this study. It was published in JAMA, and JAMA has never done what they did before on any article. What they did was the editor of this article knew that if he published this, there was going to be backlash. This is an MD. He thought the study, was so well done with controls and everything. He said, this thing has passed our muster. So I'm going to do a little editorial before I even publish it. And he said, I'm telling you, this study is good. It's well done. I don't dispute any of it. And then they published it. And then they even did like a little podcast for a few minutes where they talked about it. And it was him and this other MD. And the one MD said, wow, he said, so I don't think I can tell my patients anymore that it's okay to get fluoride in their water. And that's huge. So this was in 19, and again, it was pretty simple. So Green followed 512 mother-child pairs, and it was 6 major Canadian cities. Some of them weren't fluoridated, and they were just looking to see, were mothers in fluoridated areas, did they have a higher chance of having a child with lower IQ points? And they did in every case. So, and mind you, this is one of, I think we're over 60 now, IQ studies. But this particular one found 4.5 difference between non-fluoridated and fluoridated. The kids in the fluoridated communities had IQs on average, the boys, of 4.5 points lower. That's huge. Girls were different. Girls at, the most might have been in the 3s, but still, big difference here. This study just confirms ones that were done in Mexico, which we'll show in a second. So I wanted to show you this one, though, because I thought this was neat. As I was doing this whole presentation, I found this. Richard Sauerheber, he spent 14 years on this paper. So, yes, it came out in 2013, but he started way back in '99 on this thing. And he wanted to make sure that he looked at everything carefully, because, again, he wanted to come out with a bold statement, a bold conclusion. And I wanted to show you, so what he showed, the whole crux of this whole study here, was that industrial fluoride. You guys know that the fluoride that's added to water is not sodium fluoride, right? Everybody knows that. It's a silico fluoride. It's a waste product from the fertilizer industry. Does everybody know that? If not, you should. So sodium fluoride hasn't been added to the water in, I don't know, probably since the mid-40s, maybe early 50s. Everybody adds hydrofluorosilicic acid. We'll talk a bit more about that later, but just so you know, that animal, HF, is so different than calcium fluoride or sodium fluoride. When you get calcium fluoride or sodium fluoride in the body, you can break it down pretty fast, and your body can get rid of half of it pretty quickly. Silicofluorides are a very different animal. They stay in the body. They don't break down. They affect enzyme systems, everything, which we'll get into. But let me show you what he said. It's a pretty bold statement here. So he said this: The policy adopted by the U.S. Public Health Service in 1950 remains encouraged by the trade organization, the American Dental Association, dental insurance providers, and dental officials in the oral health division of the CDC. But none of these groups has authority to chemically treat public water supplies. The rationale for the infusions remains based on early observations that were not supported by careful experimentation using the scientific method. When examined in detail, this proved to be an anecdotal, incorrect correlation. That was his bold statement, and that sums up everything about water fluoridation, for sure. So let's talk about topical, okay? Because I'm not, although Dr. Kennedy would probably tell you that all forms of fluoride are bad, and I would agree, I at least want to touch on the differences, because there are, okay? So you guys have seen this graph, I'm sure, at some point in our learning, right? We all know that, well, here, I'll just show you. This is the things that, according to the CDC and according to all scientists, what topical fluoride does, right? It remineralizes, it inhibits the breakdown, and has an antibacterial effect, right? All of that's true. But I'll tell you this, all three of those actions can occur without a person swallowing a single drop of fluoride their entire lives. So that's the big distinction. If you want to tell somebody, go ahead and use fluoride toothpaste for whatever reason, that's very different than drinking it. So my big fight is always against water fluoridation, which a lot of this is going to be on. But I need to talk about topical, and I need to give you alternatives, which I will. Okay? So let's do that right now. So Dr. Kennedy is a big fan of povidone iodine. I've got it in my office as well. I probably don't use it as much as he used to. It is, so I'm talking just 10%. It is a strong antibacterial agent, both gram-negative and gram-positive, really strong against strep mutans and lactobacillus, which is great. But it's also, it fights fungi, well, actually it attacks fungi, mycotoxins, viruses, protozoans on contact. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. Iodine's pretty powerful. So this is a great alternative. Now, the issue with iodine, though, is you have to be careful. Maybe it's used once or twice a month as an oral rinse, right? More than that, you got to be careful. You can't do too much iodine. And you definitely can't use it on people who are either shellfish allergic or iodine allergic, obviously. But otherwise, this is really nice. And hygienists in the room, if you've got a problem where somebody keeps getting cervical caries, you can apply iodine at the cleaning, do your thing, right? Most of that will soak in, but you rinse the rest away, and that's that. You got an instant effect on that. So it's a great choice. There have been studies, though, that show it's not as effective unless it's used in conjunction with fluconazole, antifungal. So when those two are used together, apparently it's a really good anti-carcinogenic effect. MI paste, they make MI paste without fluoride. So the only time I ever use that is for the people that come in, usually teens, usually teen boys, where, man, they're just not doing anything. They're getting all these class 2, cavities, gum line things. You can see the chalkiness starting. You're like, you can talk to your blue in the face. It's not going to happen. So in those guys, I might make some trays and give them the MI paste, again, without fluoride. Okay, that's very effective. That's the minimally invasive is what that stands for. It's a nice, it's based from a milk protein, and it helps calcium and phosphate bind to the enamel is what it does. So most of us learned about this in school, I know. I'm not telling you guys anything new here. Ozone, that's the one that I use the most probably, and N4, of course. Diet's number 1. It should have been number 1, but I put it forth because I wanted to give you the ones that most people ask, what's something I can use in the office? Number 4 is what you can use. The bottom line is if you can get a person to be alkaline, right? And this holds true for this coronavirus too, by the way, which they'll talk about tomorrow and Saturday, I believe. If you're alkaline, if your pH is up, it's really impossible for viruses like that to even live. So just think about that. So if you're talking to a patient and they don't eat any green vegetables, particularly green leafy ones, spinach, kale, Brussels sprouts, things that are great anyway, that's an instant alkaline diet right there, green leafy vegetables. Some proteins are as well, some fruits are as well, but in general, if you just had to answer a simple question, green vegetables. It's amazing what would happen. So ozone. So ozone, for those of you who aren't ozone trained, I highly recommend that you become that, but you'll learn that if you take ozone gas straight out of the machine in a small syringe, you can inject it, not poking the gums, I mean in the air, get next to a gum line area on a tooth that's either sensitive, you know how they get the sensitive and they want to use Sensodyne or they want to get a filling, Ozone, just spray the gas. Just get as close as you can and do the gas and just go around that thing a couple times and you can test it. Blow the air before you start and they'll be like, ah, doc, you can't do that. Do the ozone just for a minute maybe. Try it again. It's gone. And listen, it's going to take a few visits. It's not going to happen that first visit, but it's going to take a few and that's it. Ozone is also used if you're in deep lesions, right? So you're in a deep cavity, you know you're about to expose the pulp. You don't want to do that. You can actually stop. Use your Carey's indicator, get everything you can from the DEJ, but if you're on top of that pulp and you know you're about to, it's pink, just stop. Don't get the last bit of decay. Ozonate it. It'll almost get like an etched appearance, and then do whatever layer of calcium hydroxide or whatever you want to use and then fill it up. So and that's just 2 uses for ozone. There's about 100, right, Matt? I mean, you can ozone for everything. But I'm just talking about right now Carey's, right? Okay, so these are 4 good ones. Does anybody have any questions or issues with that at all? Or those things that you just can't use? We can all get iodine, right? Go ahead, Matt. The iodine? Ozone, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't have any in this presentation, I'm sorry. But yeah, you know what? I bet later on Phil Mollica will probably talk about that. She'll be covered, for sure. Yeah, and listen, just anecdotes, that's where science starts, right? So I've been practicing for 28 years. I got a long, nice data here, right, to see how things work. So I can do somebody and see, like I have a lot of children come. I don't see children at all, not till age 12. I just don't have room. But I will always see a child if the parent says, I just want you to see these small cavities that were diagnosed. Can you help us? And if I see the little bite wings, and they got the little incipient, don't cut into that. Now, on an adult, you wouldn't even touch it, right? You would just say, boss, you'll stop it. You'll arrest it, and an alkaline diet. But on a child, those baby teeth, they go fast. So you can bring them in. I bring them in once a week for about 5 visits. Charge them $10. And I just inject the ozone gas again with a needle. I get right between the teeth, and any child can tolerate this because it's not hurting at all. And I just squirt the ozone gas. And then we take images right at the end to see. It better not have gotten any larger, which it never does. Sometimes it'll get a little smaller depending on, if it's apples to apples. You have to have the same film, same angle, obviously, to make a true scientific claim on that. But it'll stop it. So that's, just to answer your question a little further, you got to see your own results, right? We'll have a time for questions at the end, but if you got a quick one, go ahead. Povidone iodine, okay, 10%. Or betadine, same thing. You just got to be careful with it, right? Like, again, a couple times a month, or when they come in for their cleanings, you can definitely do it, right? Because that's maybe once every 6 months or whatever you guys do. But I tell patients, if you're going to rinse this in your mouth and spit it out, you better be careful. It'll stain clothes, right? So get close to that sink. It's worse than charcoal, right, as far as staining and stuff. Rinse carefully for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever. Spit it out, and then rinse your mouth after that. Remember, it has effect on contact. So this is a nice alternative. These are nice alternatives. So if someone goes, well, I have to use fluoride. Sensitive teeth. Nope. I have to use fluoride. They got a lot of decay. Nope. Okay, remember this. It's not an essential nutrient. Okay, we have shown, science has shown, if you have a lack of fluoride in your body, you're not going to die. You're not going to get any disease, in fact. There is no process in the body that requires fluoride to work. And you're going to see in a second here that fluoride, as you guys probably know, it's the most powerful halogen on the periodic table. It's the most powerful element on the entire periodic table. What does that mean? That means when it interacts with things like lead and other problems, it exacerbates it dramatically. So it's a punk. Okay, let's look at fluoride's effects. And these are things that are all backed by science. We'll cover some today, but poisons, enzymes, I think I already mentioned that. It'll increase your blood sugar, calcifies the pineal gland. We all know this. It always affects the thyroid, right? Because remember, it's the most powerful halogen. It's going to beat iodine to the thyroid when it's deficient every time. Impairs kidney function. It lowers your IQ. We've shown that. Causes bone fragility, even bone cancer, which I think I'll mention. Dental fluorosis. We all know that. Endocrine disruptor, a neurotoxin, and a cancer-causative agent. So science can back every single thing I just showed you. Now, if you showed this at a city council meeting, you'll have an expert that stands up and will read from the CDC book and tell you that it doesn't do any of this stuff. And then you come back, and because believe me, I've done this. It's exhausting. I don't do it anymore. But you'll say, doctor, with all due respect, let me show you the science, right? Whenever you get 2 experts talking against each other, nothing gets accomplished. It doesn't matter if the one expert has way more science. As long as the other guy or gal can hold their ground, nobody cares in the audience. It's amazing. So, you guys, did you see this? This was just last year. I think this was in March of last. So 1 year ago, on Compendium, they're talking about silver diamine fluoride. You guys know what that is, right? Does anybody use it? Don't be shy. Hands up if you do. Okay, thanks. Thanks for being honest. I appreciate that. By the way, just to come here, if this is your first time, I applaud you. That takes courage. I mean, if you're practicing a certain way and that's the way you know, and all of a sudden you say, I'm going to take this step, I really honor that because it's a big move. And so grab any of us. I've been here for 20 years. There's guys that have been here even longer or even less years. Grab somebody that's a member. We're all open to any questions you have. We want this to be very welcoming, okay? So that's the most important thing. But this came out here, right? It was for sensitivity is what it was supposed to be for, okay? Silver diamine fluoride is up to 5.9% fluoride. So we're talking a really high amount here, okay? Well, they started looking, maybe this could be anti-karyogenic too, right? It's fluoride. So what could go wrong with using this to stop decay? That's not decay, guys. That's the silver diamine fluoride. And have you guys seen any permanent blackening on the teeth? It's not good. I mean, would you want that? I mean, if you're a child, maybe on a child's tooth that they're going to lose, I could maybe see that, although I wouldn't because it's a high amount of fluoride. But on adult teeth, come on. This person obviously has a pH problem, not a sugar problem necessarily. That's what we got to work on, right? Let's solve the issue. Let's be functional medicine docs. That's what this is all about, right? Get to the root of what's going on. By the way, the National Institute of Health has expended about $10 million to a few universities because they want to conduct trials to decide whether this will be the first FDA-approved drug to treat dental caries. Now, let me stress that again. The first FDA-approved drug, because fluoride has never been approved by the FDA. And I'm going to get into that. That's the funnest part of this whole thing. Okay, so this is what the CDC website. So besides the ADA, the CDC are the biggest proponents of water fluoridation. You guys know that. That's the two biggest fans of it. So they say something real powerful like this. The safety and effectiveness of fluoride at levels used in community water fluoridation has been thoroughly documented by scientific and public health organizations using scientific reviews and expert panels. It's true. But let me show you what else they say if you look a little deeper on their website. Here's one of the things they said in 2001. Director Frieden said this. Fluoride's predominant effect is post-eruptive and topical. What's water fluoridation? Pre-eruptive and systemic. The exact opposite. They also said this. We are unaware of data about the additional protection from tooth decay that could result from consumption of fluoridated drinking water. 2012. Okay? That's appropriate to show that picture, by the way. So, 2015, I don't know if y'all was anybody at the Reno meeting way back 2015? No? Okay. So I presented on fluoride then, and I went through the whole history. It's an exciting thing. If you ever want to learn about the history of why fluoride ever came into being, why it became this panacea in dentistry, and why it's still touted, you got to read The Fluoride Deception by Christopher Bryson. It's maybe, I don't know, quarter-inch, half-inch thick maybe. It reads like a mystery novel. It is the most, I'm telling you, reading it is it's so unbelievable. You can't believe it's true. I'm not going to cover that here, but I do want to point out a couple of people here, okay? So that first picture there on the left is James Sumner. He's one of 14 Nobel laureates who has come out against water fluoridation. Okay, next to him is George Waldbott. He's a physician, a German physician who wrote several books on this way back when. 1957, he wrote a book called The American Fluoridation Experiment, which is kind of what I named my title, in homage to him. 1965, A Struggle with Titans. That was talking about that they're fighting powers that be to stop this. And then he did The Great Dilemma in 1978. So if you guys didn't know this, the first test that was ever done in our country was in Grand Rapids, Michigan in 1945. But 3 months prior to that happening, the ADA came out strongly against water fluoridation. And they rightfully and smartly said, we can't afford to do this. We don't know what's going to happen with this stuff. We know enough about fluoride to know that we should not be drinking this. I mean, they were like adamantly against it, and I was proud of that, I used to show the quote, but you guys can find it. It's everywhere. But 3 months after that, they did the whole Grand Rapids versus Muskegon, Michigan, right, where they fluoridated Grand Rapids, and they looked at Muskegon, and it was supposed to be a 15-year study, and we'll get into that in just a little bit as well. It turned out not to be, but once that bandwagon got rolling, that was it, okay? And, of course, the AMA and the ADA are two people that are prime. So I will say just a brief thing about the history, because I feel like I can get it down to 2 men. And believe me, there's probably 15 men involved that are key players, but 2 men. So I think this guy, in fact, I know this guy, Dr. Frederick McKay of Colorado Springs, had altruistic intentions. He was curious why in Colorado Springs in 1901, all these kids were coming in with brown teeth, right? The brown teeth thing, but they had no decay. So as a dentist, he was like, what's going on? Why they have this ugly brown teeth, but they have no cavities? I can't find any decay. So he started what became a 30-year, again, active, live study to figure it out. He couldn't figure it out. It took him 30 years. He even went to other neighboring cities and said, do your kids have, and they said, no, we don't. And he's trying to figure out, well, why? What do they eat? I mean, he looked at dye. He looked at everything. It was incredibly thorough. So I like Frederick McKay. I don't think he's a bad guy at all. But let's go to this next guy here. And this is Edward Bernays. This is the master of public relations. This is the guy that made tobacco cool. If you look him up, he's the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And make no mistake about it, he used a lot of Freud's principles to push how he did PR. Man, he was a master. I mean, he had the idea, let's get actors and actresses in Hollywood smoking on screen. Let's get doctors to smoke on commercials, TV shows, right? They even had them saying 4 out of 5 doctors, they recommend Vicaroys because they're smoky or whatever he did. It was very clever. And even further than that, he did a thing where there was a pack of cigarettes that had a weird lime green color. I can't remember the name. It was some cigarettes back then. And he thought, he went to Hollywood and said, can you get the actresses to wear this color dress, blouses, whatever? And they started wearing those things and they were smoking. And it put in your head that color, cigarettes, and they started selling more cigarettes that had that color than ever before. I mean, it's pretty brilliant stuff, okay? But it's playing with your mind is what it is, right? You're seeing things over and over again. Well, this guy was hired to do the fluoride thing very early on. Harold Hodge, you guys have heard that name. He was the head of the Manhattan Project, knew a lot about fluoride. He was the guy that you see on the chalkboard saying 1 part per million, that kind of thing. They hired Ed Bernays and said, help us. And so Ed Bernays said, here's what we do. We get doctors in white coats to say it's good. And he goes, and if you get that, doctors in white coats to say it's good, people will believe it. And that's exactly what happened. This is the book I mentioned. I'm telling you, it's so good. And even if you don't get the book, it's probably still on YouTube where Paul Connett of the Fluoride Action Network interviews him, and you get enough. You get enough bits and pieces of what's going on. But this guy, Bryson, was just he was an investigative reporter, I think, and he was asked to look into fluoride, and he's like, fluoride? He has a cool British accent, which I can't do. He said, fluoride's great. I don't understand why I'm doing this. And they said, no, call I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody here in this country that's, like a nice consumer advocate. And so he did, and he said, oh my God, yeah, there's a lot to this. And it started him on a trail. And once you get into this and you learn about it, you can't stop, and it's scary and all that. But anyway, it's a great book. I highly recommend it. So can I just show you just a few quotes? I'm not going to read them. You guys can read them, but this first one's important. So pay attention. These are actual quotes by Bernays. I'll give you a second or two. Especially that last sentence, largely by men we have never heard of. Kind of sounds like government, doesn't it? Look at this. It becomes vicious and reprehensive only when its authors consciously and deliberately disseminate what they know to be lies or when they aim at effects which they know to be prejudicial to the common good. Okay, this is what fluoridation is. It's crazy. Okay, let's do another video. Remember, these are all pro fluoridation. This video is a guy named Aaron Carroll. I'll tell you more about him in a second, but he's got this little triage video thing that he does, and apparently he knows everything about anything and everything. He's the expert, and so just let's see if I can get to work, and you can
To the research. Overwhelming evidence has existed for over 60 years that proves the efficacy of water fluoridation. Some of the best studies come from the early days of fluoridation because it was easier then to find groups of people who were not exposed to any fluoride sources. In a 15-year landmark study from Grand Rapids, Michigan, children who received fluoridated water from birth had 50 to 63% less tooth decay than children from a nearby city in Michigan who drank non-fluoridated water.
Okay, first of all, it was a 5-year study. It was supposed to be 15 years, but after 5 years, they said, you know what, we got enough data, it's good, let's go with it. There wasn't good data. And that number 50 to 63%, that really came from Mike Harold Hodge because there was no science to show that. And I'm going to show you guys how to break down the huge 1986 landmark study that we all know about that proved that water fluoridation works, quotes. But this was no landmark study. This was an experiment. They stopped after 5 years. Did you lose me? Okay. They ran with these numbers and that was it. They ran with it. Okay, so let me show you how they play with the graphs. This is the science playing. And listen, when I first see this, I don't know either what I'm doing. I have to like ask people smarter than me and say, how do I read this graph? What am I looking at? So here's the deal. If you look carefully on the y-axis there, you'll see the percent of decay, right? That's the amount of decay in a percentage-wise. Now remember, this is all about the 1986-87 NIDR study. This was a landmark study. 39,000 school kids in 39 areas. They were comparing for many years to see, do children in fluoridated areas have less cavities? And this was the result. Okay, so the average was 18% decay rate. So 18% decrease in decay, as high as 32 in some cases, right? But the average was 18. But look right here. This is a relative difference. Now, I want to point this out because this is important. Relative is just like the average of all the samples in each age group, right? So what if you got like a bunch of 7-year-olds in an area that have a lot of decay, and then you got none in these 9-year-olds over here, they just lump it all together. That's called a relative thing. That's not the way you do it, okay? How you do it is absolute. Absolute value is when you look at the average for one child's mouth. Okay, there's 128 tooth surfaces in a child. You look at that child and that age group, that is the absolute value. So let me show you that graph. So this is relative, showing this beautiful up to 32% decay drop, 18% average. So this graph doesn't look that much different, but it does go up. But look at the y-axis. Look at the numbers over here now. Look, 1.4. Okay, so we're talking a big difference. And look, I'll put the graphs together, and you tell me if water fluoridation was proven to work. That's the true science right there. This is what they touted. This is the actual science. Come on. We're barely over 0. The truth is, guys, it was one surface on one tooth. There's 6 surfaces per tooth. One surface of 128 different surfaces. That was the difference. And keep this in mind too, by the way. Children that grow up in fluoridated communities have delayed eruption. You guys have probably seen this as dentists. Sometimes up to 6 months. So how clever to do a study maybe right at age 6, right when they get those 6-year molars, right? Because kids in non-fluoridated are going to have what? More teeth. Fluoridated have less. It's already a skewed study, and that's exactly what happens. And that's exactly what happened with this study as well, by the way. It's very cleverly done. Okay? So here's the problems, right? Time trial is short. Like I mentioned, that one was 5 years. It's got to be at least 10, and that's never been done, by the way. And I just told you about the delayed tooth eruption. Those are 2 big problems. Okay, so now this next video, pay attention again. I like to watch the person speaking. Like I like to see how they talk. Do they use words like never? Or, you know, I'm just not going to talk about that. You know, come on. You have to realize, even these guys in these debates, I was the one who did it. I'm the one. You're like, okay, you know, it starts to get a little weird. So look, let's see if this will pop right up, I hope.
It's important to understand that community water fluoridation is effective. Approximately 25% reduction in tooth decay. It's safe. On that, I'm not going to give you any percentage because it is absolutely safe.
Would you expect the incidence of fluorosis to increase in our community?
Yes. Yes, I would expect you would have more children with white flecks on their teeth. I would expect that when you looked at those children, you would think that their teeth were very attractive.
On that, I'm not, because it is absolutely safe. This was in Sedgwick County in Wichita, and it was 2012, I think, was when this video happened, he was being asked about water fluoridation. And this guy, by the way, was the director of the CDC at one point. So this is a pretty big player. And good for Wichita, they voted it down, again, for the third time. So yeah, that's real attractive. I don't know anybody that thinks fluorosis, even mild, is not attractive. But I've seen cases like this, these two cases. I've restored these, and I'm sure there's guys and plenty of dentists in this room who've done this. You know damn well that when you're prepping that tooth, you just got to pick a place to stop, right? It's chalky. It's not solid. It's porous and brittle, and you just got to pick. I guess my margin's going to be here. You got to stop at some point, right? And I made that argument to a guy who was from West Texas, and he's like, "It's rock solid. You're crazy." I'm like, seriously? I mean, it's not rock solid at all. You know, maybe these teeth are hard, but that's just because it's mild fluorosis, right? And keep in mind, what is actual fluorosis? It's the cosmetic effect that we see, right? There's already things that have happened systemically to get to this point. This is what we're seeing. So you know at this point, there's already stuff internally. And that's the argument. This is not just a cosmetic effect. Okay? And, you know, if the EPA, who, by the way, does not regulate, they don't regulate additives in water. We'll get into that as well here in a little bit. But if they did do that, or to do their true job of disease control, fluoridation would be ended immediately just based on the National Research Council study. You guys probably saw that, 2006, I believe it was, where they were hired to look at fluoride in water and see, are we okay with our level right now, which is called the MCLG, the maximum contaminant level. The level at which you can ensure safety is 4 milligrams per liter right now. 4. Okay, that's really high. That's still the MCLG. But nonetheless, 12 researchers got together, all scientists. They looked, they studied it in detail. In that green book, if you can get your hands on that as well, they said that after looking at all the data, we've looked at everything, we think that the MCLG should be 0. That's the level it should be to be safe. It's 4 right now. So nonetheless, nothing has happened. It hadn't changed. So that's my point. This is an enforceable thing, by the way. I don't know how we get away with it. You guys remember this, right? 2011 is when the EPA and Health and Human Services came out and said, hey, we realize that there's too much fluoride out there. We're seeing a lot of fluorosis in kids, you know, 41%. Every 2 out of 5 kids has water fluorosis. So here's the deal. They're getting it in food, they're getting it in water, probably at the dental office, other things. Let's cut down what we put in the water. So instead of having a range of 0.7 to 1.2 parts per million, let's just go down to 0.7. Now, I promise you there's no way that places like Chicago or New York City or other places around that are already naturally high, and they had to add some more to get to whatever they got to, 1.2, 1.3, have now brought it down to 0.7. I seriously doubt that. But that was the law, which, well, it became law in 2015. You have to get down to 0.7. That was the issue, right? Let me show you something here, though. So now they're saying it's probably as high as 65%. And I say they. If you're familiar at all with what's called NHANES, it stands for the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. NHANES is a study that happens every 5 years or so, and they look at the data, and they do surveys as well to follow up and see, are the results of what have been published prior in the science and what we're recommending, is it still holding water? And I'm going to show you something. I think it'll show. No, I'll just tell you. So, well, I'll show you later. But NHANES, as of the 2012 report, they feel like it's maybe as high as 65% of kids now have water fluorosis. That's a high amount. So look at this. The Journal of Dental Research, this is March of last year, so 1 year ago. Chris Narath, he's a brilliant researcher from Yale. We've had him speak here, I think, once. We'll have him again. But they did this study here. Let me show you. So it's the trend. So they looked at all the NHANES things to see what's going on. This is what I want to show you. Look at this. So they say that it has increased from 22 on the first NHANES study, which were these years, 86, 87, to 41, 99 and 2004, to 65 in this one. But look at the moderate and severe, from 1.2 to 30.4%. You think this is an epidemic? You think there's something really going wrong with this, that we should stop water fluoridation immediately? So let's go back in time. This is my second year of dental school, as a dentist, excuse me, 95, my second year of practice, and this came out in JADA. And I thought this was the end of water fluoridation. Because look at what the abstract says. Concerns about the paucity, the lack of, basically, detailed intake fluoride data. So they're talking about, we've got this fluorosis, and we don't really have a whole lot of studies to back it up. And I thought, that's it. That's exactly right. You don't. It's over. I was wrong. 5 years later, I thought, now I'm right. John Featherstone and Jada, this was a great article, right? He basically says in this article, where he was looking at, again, water, caries prevention, that the true predominant effect of anti-carcinogenic activity is topically, not systemically. This is in Jada. I thought this is it. 2000, we're done with water fluoridation. This is the pinnacle of this. It's done. And I was wrong. It wasn't done. So let's get into some really good studies here, and we'll get into a lot. And I'll show you how to look at science and how to really discern. First of all, it needs to be a peer-reviewed journal, right? There's a lot of things that are not peer-reviewed. Doesn't mean that it's not okay in a nice study and good science, but it's not peer-reviewed. It's got to be a peer-reviewed journal that other people have looked at and said, this thing is worth publishing. So this is just a little over a year ago, right? Bashash, this was the Mexican one, okay? Look at this. So they're looking at ADHD, so neurobehavioral things happening here, right? So here's the study. 213 Mexican mother children, right? And they were looking to see at the mom's maternal urinary, right? How much fluoride she had in her urine, and then the effects of ADHD. They looked at the kids after and did assessments as well. So it wasn't just looking at the MUF, okay? But in all cases, right? Let's see if we got more. Here we go. Look at this. Higher concentration of maternal urinary fluoride associated with more ADHD-like symptoms in school-age children. So this is a pretty amazing study because inattention problems, this is neuro. This is when we're starting to get into neurotoxicity. Because we already knew about the fluorosis, and a lot of us already knew about the thyroid, pineal gland, all that. But now we're talking about the brain. So now we're going to hopefully get a little more accomplished, right? Okay, look at this. Christine Till, by the way, she's speaking in Nashville, I believe, so I'm super excited about that. But this is 2018. This is another one looking at the urinary fluoride concentration, right? Let's see if we got her methods here. About 1,600 pregnant women measured concentrations and even considered things like, tea consumption, how much fluoride they had in the water. So she was looking at all these parameters, right? Not just to say, okay, fluoridated versus non. So she looked at all these things here, and look at her results. Nearly 2 times higher for pregnant women living in fluoridated regions compared with non-fluoridated. So this was another huge study, and Christine Till has been on several shows and news stories addressing this, because again, this was a scary thing. Now, again, we're talking, some neurotoxicity issues. There's some problems going on here. Results were very similar to Bashash that I showed you. Look at this. 2019. Again, very recent. Infants' fluoride intake excessive. Okay? I think that's the Journal of Clinical Pediatric Dentistry. Look at the results. 4.4% of infants exceeded the recommended upper limit of 0.1 mg per kg per day, resulted in 36.8% of infants exceeding the upper limit. You guys know that like mother's milk has like almost no fluoride. I mean, it's, 0.004, something like that. It's not even close to what you would get if you were drinking, formula that's constituted with water that has fluoride in it, which we'll show you in a second. But, this is the issue that I make whenever I try to argue with someone. I go, forget everything. There's just no dose control, right? An infant, again, getting formula is going to drink so much water for her weight as compared to an adult. And athletes that are outside a lot are going to drink way more water than some of us who are in our office all day. There's no dose control. There's no medicine on earth that is prescribed without a prescription, and everybody has to take it, right? And you have no dose control. Good luck. Bellinger did a review. So this is an extensive review, kind of like when I showed you earlier on Grandjean, right? He did a review of these as well. Well, Bellinger did this in 2018, so a little sooner, was looking at a lot of the Chinese IQ. There's been about 55, 60 Chinese IQ studies where they're doing the same thing. And over in China, it was interesting because they could have communities that were so similar. Like, you talk about having controlled study. Nowadays, you could say, well, okay, Griffin, all this sounds great, but who knows if this person was, eating a bunch of other stuff that had fluoride. That's a good point. So China, what they did was they had 2 communities that were pretty much side by side, but this one had fluoride in the water and this one didn't. Otherwise, pretty much the same characteristics, same upbringing, same diets. It's pretty well done. Now, over in America, they'd say, we don't care, that's China. But it's still a valid human study. And so Bellinger looked at this stuff, and, same thing, looked at everything and said, I absolutely see. They talked about the World Health Organization has the 10 chemicals of the greatest public health concern. Fluoride's on that list. So is mercury, by the way. But they never really talked about fluoride affecting the brain until all these studies came out. So now fluoride's on that list. You guys have seen something like this or similar. This is kind of interesting. They're all like this, World Health Organization. It doesn't matter who does it. But, point to me out the country or name them that has fluoride and those that don't. All the decay rates are going down pretty evenly in the world. Hopefully we've gotten smarter on diet. Maybe our home care has gotten better. Who knows? So it has nothing to do with if you've got fluoride in your water or not. Okay, so remember the video earlier, the very first one where the guy said go to reputable sites, ADA, CDC, ILikeMyTeeth.org. Do you guys remember hearing that? So let's look at this. So on that website, people can write in and say, blah, 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 here's my question. So this person says, I found an article on the internet about something called fluorosis. Is that a reason not to fluoridate? And this is the answer that they said on that. A study published in 2010 found that mild fluorosis was not an adverse health condition, and that it might even have favorable effects on the overall health. So I love to follow the end notes. That's my thing. I want to see what 50. There's got to be some major scientific thing there proving that bold statement. And no, it's just a news release. So these are the games that are played, and I'm going to show you more of these, and you may not think it's funny, and you shouldn't, but I did laugh at first. That is not science. You cannot make a bold statement here, show an end note, and then follow it, and it's a news release. That's not science. So remember earlier, too, when Ed Bernays had the quote about we get influenced mostly by people you never even know, right? A few. Okay. Well, these are 5 gentlemen who would like to be those people. So this is Steve Slott. Next to him is Chuck Haney, Johnny Johnson, the president of this group. This is Kurt Ferre and Myron Alukian. You guys saw him on that video early on, right? So these guys formed what's called the American Fluoridation Society. It was formed in 2014, and it was formed truly as a reaction to the movements that we're making. The Fluoride Action Network, the IAOMT, other groups. We're pretty strong now. We got a pretty loud voice, and all the science is coming out as well. So they're getting worried. So they formed this group, and this group, their goal is to go to towns that are either fighting, possibly adding fluoride or ending it, and give the science. So I want to show you this next video. It's a hygienist, I guess like a little webinar or podcast she does, and she's asking questions of Johnny Johnson, who is this middle guy right here. And the question that she asked, if I can get this, she asked, how seriously should dental professionals regard the efforts of fluoridation opponents?
Very seriously. They have every opportunity and every ounce of malice or whatever reason they use in their body to try and twist this credible science to make it sound like fluoride is the worst thing on earth, that it causes every ill health that you could imagine of. The only thing they haven't claimed is ingrown toenails at this point.
Okay, we all hear this or have read this a million times. It seems like every Surgeon General touts this. I mean, all the way back to Coop and beyond. One of the 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. And that's just silly. I'd say it's one of the 10 great public hoaxes of the 20th century. Okay, what does the FDA say? You remember I said earlier right now that it's unapproved, right? They have never approved any fluoride-containing supplement, either prescription or over the counter. Now, as a dentist, we can prescribe it, right? We can prescribe drops or pills or whatever, and you can go to a pharmacy and get it. All that's illegal, truthfully. And so we petitioned, we being the IAOMT and the Fluoride Action Network, several years ago, we did a PSA where we basically talked about this. Let's do something about it finally. It's been years and years and years. Do your job. It's not approved. So either approve it and show us why you're approving it, or don't approve it and let's end this. Nothing's happened. Okay, so this is what, again, I laughed at first, but then I cried. So this is how it works, guys. So I've already told you this a couple times, right? They've never approved fluoridation, nor have they banned it. So in 79, they say, you know what, let's pass this over to the EPA. We don't want to deal with any kind of additives in water. EPA, that's your job. 1979. EPA, they go, we don't really want to do it either. We're not going to approve it or ban it. In fact, we're going to pass it over to the National Sanitation Foundation, the NSF. And in fact, we're going to actually lend you some researchers, and let's do at least 20 toxicological studies so we can prove that the fluoridation additives are safe, and then we can say that's NSF Rule 60. Now, I think that's smart. The EPA is saying we got to do something behind this. We can't just stamp a rule on something without showing that we've done at least 20 studies. Okay, so you know what happened, right? NSF says, we're not going to do the studies. They still have the rule, though, right? No studies are done, and look at this. All vendors of fluoridation get that mark, a symbol of the NSF Rule 60. It's not even a real rule. It was never backed by anything. But see how this, I got this from a lawyer, so I know it's accurate. My point is that look how it just passes on, and you know, honestly, most of us are pretty stupid to follow all this. We're not going to pay attention. We're not going to, what is the NSF Rule 60? Well, I heard it means that it's been approved. Okay. What's the rule? The rule is that it's totally been approved, it's safe, everything's good. All right, show me the studies. That's next topic. Passing the buck. I like these videos. I like when someone uses the word never.
Fluoride has been studied for many, many years, and there's never been a scientific study that has determined definitively that fluoride is related to any health risks.
Okay, so I'm going to use the word never properly 3 times. There has never been a single randomized clinical trial to prove that it actually works or is safe. There's never been a long-term follow-up to prove that it actually worked. And silicofluorides, remember that's what I told you, that's what's added to every city water system, have never been FDA approved for ingestion, and they were never proven safe prior to dumping on our water supply. Now, you're going to get an argument from somebody. They're going to say, because believe me, I've had all these fights, so I'm going to play 8 Mile. They're going to say, okay, yeah, we get it. It's not sodium fluoride. It's hydrofluorosilicic acid. However, in the body, it dissociates like any kind of fluoride, and so it's the same thing, okay? So you can say all you want to, Griffin, it's the same thing. Well, actually, that was disproven 30-something years ago. German Westendorf did his research. He was doing his PhD to see the anti-carcinogenic effects of fluoride. And lo and behold, as he was doing all this, he was realizing they were using silicofluorides. And he thought, let me see what goes on with that. And look at this. Look at this. The kinetics of acetylcholinesterase inhibition and the influence of fluoride and fluoride complexes on the protein. This is his nice title, right? And what he showed was that there was no anti-carcinogenic effect, and that the silicofluorides had much more effects on the body. So it didn't dissociate, right? Remember I told you earlier, calcium fluoride and sodium fluoride get in the body, can pretty much break up pretty quickly, and you'll eliminate half very quickly. Silicofluorides, whole different animal, stays in your body. So that argument is not true. And let's go back for a second. The second one, so I grew up in San Antonio, and now I'm proud because San Antonio didn't start fluoridating until 2000. I was long gone. I was growing up by then. So I'm very grateful that I just happened to be in a town that didn't. But here's my point. I went down there to try to fight it in 2000, and I brought all the science, and I would show up for debates, and the other guy would never show up. And they basically played on the hearts of all the indigent kids. If you don't get this, you're going to have decay. Don't listen to Dr. Cole, whatever. You need to do this. And anyway, they ended up doing it. Well, City Metro, which is in San Antonio, actually did do a study 9 years later, and they wanted to find out, did it work? So they spent $3 million, and they looked at decay rates, and I don't know how they got their data, but this is what they did. They looked at the poorest of Bexar County's children, and guess what they found? Decay had actually increased 13%. And they came out with that study, and nobody talked about it. It increased 13%. Shouldn't we stop it now? We tried it, 9 years, it's not working. Stop it. They didn't. Okay. Don't worry about reading that. Trust me. The reason why I did it because I wanted to be true to where I found it. Found it on the ADA website, and so I just pulled that page. You don't have to read any of it, but I want you to notice all the crossouts. Pretty much all those crossouts. So I'm going to give the ADA some props right now. So they have a meeting called Interprofessional Relations Meeting about every 5 years. They're probably having it pretty soon this year if they haven't already. But this was the most recent one, 2015. And what they do is they look at what they've got in their literature out there, and they start saying, do we need to change some things? I like that, right? They're seeing the science, and they're saying, maybe we should change some things. Look at all the crossouts. So to their credit, and let's get a little closer here. So those you can probably read, but look at this. Resolved that the ADA recommends, crossed out, recommends the continuation of controlled studies of the benefits derived from the fluoridation of water. Nope. They crossed out and said, we support ongoing research on the safety and effectiveness. So I think that's smart. I think they're kind of backtracking a little bit and saying, maybe we should change our wording a little bit. So I have to give them props where it's due. That's good. That's a start. You guys remember Aaron Carroll? Oh, just to tell you again. So he's a pediatrician, but he's also on staff, I think in Indiana. And again, he has this healthcare triage thing where he's the expert on anything and everything. Turn the volume up, guys. Just leave it on. You ready?
Kids do sometimes have a habit of swallowing their toothpaste. Fluorosis is the reason that the American Dental Association recommends that children under 6 do not use more than a pea-sized amount of toothpaste. We assume that little kids are going to swallow it, and if they swallow a lot more than that pea-sized amount, they're more likely to get fluorosis. Toothpaste delivers a much more concentrated amount of fluoride than drinking water does. So the biggest cause of fluorosis is likely swallowed toothpaste, not water.
Come on. Seriously? Would anybody watch that and go, oh, that makes sense? Okay, we've already talked about this, but it's worth talking about again, because again, this is the ultimate argument to somebody. You don't have to know anything else about water fluoridation except how do you control the dosage, right? Look at breast milk. I nailed it, 0.004 parts per million of fluoride versus 0.7, if they're doing it right, in the water supply. And you know that most moms, at least how many moms can afford to have bottled water delivered to the house or buy all their, not many, at least not in the engine areas of town. So this is who is getting burned, right? Those who can't do it. So they got to use tap water. So now that baby's getting 250 times the level of mother's milk, sometimes higher. Come on, there's no way to control that dosage. So this is, I'm going to get into fluoridation facts, which is something on the ADA website in a bit, but let's just do this one real quickly here because it's worth looking at. So a few years ago, I went through fluoridation facts, and I presented in, I think, Reno, where I showed that I went through all the references, and I basically was making fun of it because it should be. That a lot of the references, as I've showed you already, were not science. And I wanted to say, look, I looked at all 359, and 27% of them were like, letters to the editor, personal correspondent, just ridiculous things. And that wasn't science. And then I showed that the majority of the rest of it was from something called Carey's research, which is not peer-reviewed. So I was just trying to show that, that be careful when you read something, it says fact, that it's not necessarily fact. Well, I'm not taking credit for this, but since that time, now to see fluoridation facts, you have to be a member, and to actually download it, you got to pay. So something changed. I'm sure it was the Fluoride Action Network because those guys are doing amazing work. But the point is that at the time back then, I wasn't a member. I could just go on their website. I could see it. I could download it. I could look at it, and that was that. It's very different now. So I had to call a buddy to get his number to get in so I could look at the new ones. But this is what they do. They have questions like this, right? What standards have been established to ensure the safety of fluoride additives used in community water fluoridation? And you'll get an answer like this. And first of all, I told you right, there's no sodium fluoride being added to water, okay? It's the second ones, sodium fluorosilicate and fluorosilicic acid. Meet safety standards established by the American Water Works Association, okay, and the NSF. Well, we'll just discount them, right? Because that's bogus. But the American Water Works Association, I don't know what that is. That sounds interesting. So I looked it up. They were founded in 1881. Their key mission is to advocate for safe and sustainable water. So that sounds like a really nice thing to do, a really valiant thing, a virtuous thing to do. So let's see what they say here. Fact, right? Water additives meet safety standards in response to requests by Environmental Protection Agency to establish minimum requirements to ensure the safety of products added to water for its treatment, thereby ensuring the public's health. Let's follow that end note, guys. Number 4. Okay, it's the American Water Works. All right, I'm okay with that. That's not necessarily scientific, but maybe they got some good principles, so I'm not going to dog that one. I'll just skip that. That's not important. Okay. Let's look at this. This was a letter to the ADA, or from the ADA, excuse me, to Ruth Lund. She's at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, the Office of Report on Carcinogens, National Toxicology Program Division. Basically, at that time, they were looking to find out, is fluoride a carcinogen? And the ADA very smartly immediately sent them a letter and said, we are so glad you're doing this. We're behind you. We'll give you all the data in the world. And they went on this letter to give some science. So let's look. I block everything out, so all you got to read is the yellow. Last April, the U.S. Public Health Service noted there was no compelling evidence that fluoride is associated with osteosarcoma. We know there's been studies to show that. We know that. Okay? Elise Basson was the first one to do it back at Harvard. So we know there's studies already to show that. But let's follow them. 4 and 5. Press release and a statement. I don't know how you can say such a bold statement, and then that's your end note. How about this one? The announcement was based on a 4-year evidence review of the effects of fluoride on human health, including any potential links with cancer. After careful review, the U.S. Public Health Service concluded that the available literature does not support classifying fluoride as a carcinogen. Now, this is going to be science. It's a recommendation. This is how you got to read things, right? So, I mean, I could publish something right now, and you guys could say, wow, that looks really good. Well, you got to follow my notes, right? You got to see where I got my science from. So, in the academy, if you ever want to get your fellowship, you have to do a scientific review. And I can tell you right now that doing that, you're going to get hammered way harder than what these guys got. I mean, my first one that I did, I worked on it so hard, and they sent it back. No, you got to do more. You got to show more. That's not good enough. I mean, that's how it should be, right? You should be pushed against the wall to prove what you're saying, because especially damning statements like that, that's a really profound statement. So let's get into this more. This is fun. So this is, again, fluoridation facts. At the time that I looked at it, as I mentioned, there were 359 references. There's more now. They've changed it, by the way, and I got some new things on here that I'll show you. But my point is that it was at the time a 71-page document. Now I think it's over 100 pages. And the first 30, they basically talk about people like me. They say, you're going to hear these things. Let me tell you what the real, you're going to be told this. Let me tell you, that's what the first 20 to 30 pages is. It's very different now. It's like, let us preface our facts first. So let's talk about this. Generally accepted, peer-reviewed scientific evidence. Okay? Fact. As discussed throughout this document, the best available scientific evidence consistently has indicated that fluoridation of community water supplies is safe and effective. And I want to bold this last sentence right here. Of the thousands of credible scientific studies, none has shown health problems associated with the consumption of optimally fluoridated water. No valid studies at all. Over 270 published studies on the kidney, 140 on the liver, 350 on the brain, 130 human studies, 200 animal studies, 33 cell studies, and these numbers were from September. They're up now. So you can't say that. Okay, look at this. This is also from Fluoridation Facts. Water fluoridation is an effective and inexpensive means of obtaining the fluoride necessary to prevent tooth decay. We're talking about decay, so I can still be talking about systemic here. Studies show that water fluoridation continues to be effective in reducing tooth decay. Again, this number is random, 20 to 40% in children and adults. Okay, so this is definitely going to be scientific. It's recommendations. You see what I mean? And I can do this all day. So just look at things with be open to all this and look at it and then do your own due diligence. And you don't need me to show you this. Look, this last one's got to be, it's just from their fluoridation facts. They're actually quoting themselves in their facts on that last one. Okay, look at this. The U.S. Preventive Service Task Force recommends the clinical use of oral fluoride supplementation starting at age 6 months through 5 years of children whose water supply. So they're now saying if you're not fluoridated or it's low, you need to give them drops or tablets. We got to actually add more to them, right? So this definitely has to be scientific. And it's a final recommendation statement. That's what I'm talking about. It's not science. Look at this. This is science. Here's a cool graph. Look at this. This is 2009. I want you to look. So what they're showing here, if I can use my little pointer here, is That's the number of fluorosis cases. This is the percent of children, okay? This is decay rate, right? How much cavities they have. Look at this. As you go up in the amount of fluoride, look at fluorosis, but look at decay. Didn't really change much, did it? Pretty wild, huh? I actually like this next guy. I think he sounds like a nice guy. I just put him in there because, to me, I feel like when someone talks like this, I want to listen to him. He's not right, but I still want to listen to him. I like how he sounds.
It really does confuse people because if you let's say you happen to go to Google and just type in fluoridation or water fluoridation, due to various means, one of the first ones that's going to pop up is an anti-fluoridation group, and they've got a lot of somewhat quasi-scientific information they put on there that really confuses the public. And so it's made it much more difficult for us to make sure that people get the real science and the real facts behind this. It becomes a real emotional issue when really it should just be based on science.
Right? I mean, he's right. It should be, his last sentence is right. It should be based on science. But I like the way he speaks. I thought he was nice and tempered, you know, and I don't like the term quasi-science because I'm actually showing you guys science. So let's do that. Okay. Does fluoride, as provided by community water fluoridation, inhibit the activity of enzymes in humans? This is on fluoridation facts again. Answer. The best available scientific evidence demonstrates that the recommended levels of fluoride in drinking water has no effect on human enzyme activity. And look at their fact. The best available scientific evidence has not indicated that it has any effect on human enzyme activity. So that day, when I read this, I go, yeah, I'm just going to Google it or Yahoo search it, whatever. And I did, and I took a picture of that page. Every single one of those things that came up on page 1 are all linked to studies, actual peer-reviewed studies showing effects on enzyme activity. Who's not going to do that? Right? I Google everything. So wouldn't someone say, well, that's a bold statement. Let me just see if that's true. And immediately the first page tells you it's not true. Now, that's not science. Me Googling or Yahoo search is not science, but I just wanted to show you what pops up immediately. Let's get into some. Does the ingestion of optimally fluoridated water adversely affect the thyroid gland? I've already showed you that. We know it does. But look what they say. Best available evidence, it does not have an adverse effect. And look at the fact. A number of systematic reviews completed in the last 10 years have looked at a possible association between exposure to fluoride and thyroid function, which is true. And they talk about this thing, SHEAR, okay? This is the Scientific Committee on Health and Environmental Risk. This is the European Commission cites these guys a lot, and now the ADA is doing it as well. SHEAR is a group, but whatever. I mean, it might be scientific. I'm not going to say it's not. But they're kind of the final word on a lot of this stuff. So let me show you this. So this is, again, from Fluoride Facts, but they're saying that, you know, we looked at SHEAR, and they did a very critical review, and they said that a systematic evaluation of the human studies does not suggest a potential thyroid effect at realistic exposures to fluoride. So let's follow that end note. It's them. They're quoting themselves. Science? Come on. So let's look at studies. Look at this. 2018. Impact on drinking water fluoride on human thyroid hormones. So they looked at this, and what they find, sure enough, those who had higher fluoride concentration, higher TSH values. It was a real simple study. 2018, peer-reviewed. Here's another one, Springer Plus. That name has changed, by the way, but at the time it was Springer Plus. 2014, again, they're looking at fluoride ingestion levels, looking at the hormone levels to see if there's any effect, and sure enough, the serum fluoride concentration significantly altered FT3, FT4, and TSHA concentrations. Basically, it affected the thyroid level on all counts. Higher fluoride levels affected thyroid. Here's another one. 2018, the Journal of Contemporary Dental Practice. Fluoride, thyroid hormone derangements, and its correlation with tooth eruption patterns. So they're kind of looking at fluorosis and seeing how the teeth come in. And, you know, I mean, how can the ADA not acknowledge these studies? These are studies in peer-reviewed journals in the last 10 years, as they stated. These are the last couple of years. Okay? Here's another one. Environment International, again, peer-reviewed. 2018, fluoride exposure and thyroid function among adults living in Canada. This was a study that kind of mimics the one that I showed you guys earlier, okay? Just from about 11 months ago. That's it. Okay, Canadian thyroid study here. So look at this. This is that study. I want to break it down for you. 7 million adults they used. This is a big sampling. 7 million adults in Canada, age 18 to 79, who were not taking any thyroid medication. 7 million is a huge sample size, guys. They looked again at the urinary fluoride concentrations. This is the Christine Till study that I showed you earlier. And look at this. Serum TSH levels provide a measure of thyroid function. They used a lot of analyses, regression analyses, to make sure they were doing this right. And let me go back for a second. The results. Adults in Canada who have moderate to severe iodine deficiencies and higher urinary fluoride have higher TSH levels. Direct correlation here. Let's go back to fluoride facts again. Is the consumption of water fluoridated at recommended levels harmful to the kidneys? Answer. It's not been shown to cause or worsen kidney disease. Fact. And they talk about it, 60% of fluoride, it's all good. And they said, in fact, or however, several large community-based studies of people with long-term exposure to drinking water with fluoride concentrations up to 8 parts per million, so they're going really high, have failed to show an increase in kidney disease. Now, that's a very bold statement, and I think there's definitely science behind this, and there is. Okay, it was published in JADA, 1956 and 1958. Now, I'm not saying science was invalid then. It is. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying those are the two studies that you're citing in a 2020 edition of Fluoride Facts. I mean, and by the way, that first study it has nothing to do with kidney disease at all. So, again, and I didn't read these studies. I can't even find them, to be honest. But if I did, I'd probably, if I went through with a fine-tooth comb, it probably wouldn't back what they're saying. But we got to give due where it's due. So let's take a look at this. Effective water fluoridation on the development of medial vascular calcification in uremic rats. 2014 toxicology. It's a good study. Again, the rats that had more had problems with the kidneys. That simple. Look at this. Exploring the role of excess fluoride in chronic kidney disease review. So this is this came out in 2018, but this review covered 100 years of studies on the toxicity of fluoride on human and animal kidneys. 100 years. Okay, and they showed a direct effect on higher fluoride levels and kidney disease. That's a big review. Peer reviewed. Let's go back. This is about as far back as I'm going to go, 87. This was an interesting study, though. This was looking at one particular case of excess fluoride in a child. It was interesting. This study was about 32 years ago, I guess. They looked at one kid, and prior to this study coming out, again, peer-reviewed, this is a kidney disease journal. Prior to this coming out, there was really not a whole lot of studies showing renal insufficiency caused by fluoride exposure. So this was the first kind of case study that they did, if you will. And so because this patient was so young, too, and had it, they followed it for a pretty long time of fluoride intake, they could really rule out any other causes of renal insufficiency, and they showed a definite causal relationship. This kid definitely developed chronic kidney disease from fluoride exposure over time. So I already mentioned NHANES, so we don't necessarily have to go over this again, but I just wanted to it's worth showing again that, you know, they do these studies every few years to see if the science is being backed by the actual findings. And I like that we have this. Again, National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. Okay, it's a program of studies designed to assess the health and nutritional status of adults and children living in this country. And they look at everything, okay? So we don't have to go over this because I've already covered NHANES. Does drinking fluoridated water increase the level of lead in the blood or cause lead poisoning in children? Okay, so they're going to probably quote or shear, which is fine. The best available scientific evidence has not shown any association between water fluoridation and blood lead levels. In fact, a number of reviews has showed no association. It's got to be science, and it's just sure. Again, I'm not dogging it. I'm just telling you that can't be your final word on this. We have to see a little bit more, right? So is there studies to show that? Of course there are. Neurotoxicology. 2000, Masters and Copland, looked at this, the association of silicofluoride treated water with elevated blood lead. It makes it go up sometimes 900-fold. It's unreal. I'm going to get into it later with the pipes and stuff, but the point is that blood levels of lead go up in the presence of fluoride, particularly silicofluorides, which is what everybody's getting. That's what this report was all about. 2010 toxicology, peer-reviewed. Fluoride increases lead concentrations in whole blood and calcified tissues from lead-exposed rats. Just a rat study, but a good one. Copland and Masters again, 2007. Again, they're confirming blood lead levels go up. And the numbers are pretty amazing. I mean, like I said, sometimes it's like a multi-hundred-fold difference when you add fluoride to lead. So I'm going to get into that in a second. In fact, let's get into it right now. Does it corrode water pipes? Okay, they say no. That's their answer, no. Allegations that it causes that is not supported. Now, you got to be pretty bold to say that an acid's not going to cause any corrosion, because that's what it is, right? It's fluorosilicic acid. It's extremely corrosive. And I got to tell you, which I'll show you in a second, that Flint, Michigan, I guarantee you that's why those pipes opened up and lead came out. It was because they've been fluoridated forever, right? It's going to happen in probably all our communities. There's already been about 50 accidents that I'm going to show you just real quick on the screen. My point is that it absolutely causes corrosion. Look at this. Their fact is, it says, nope, adding it to, it will not corrode water pipes. So let's follow that science. American Water Works Association manual. Now I'm starting to doubt them. At first I was like, I'm going to give them the benefit. It sounds like a cool group. But now that's what your manual says, so I'm supposed to believe that. So let's talk about Flint. Because they definitely knew that there was fluorosilicic acid circulating through those lead pipes, and I guarantee it increases the corrosion. That's been proven, like lab experiments. Look at this. Children living in areas with FSA-treated water have higher levels of lead in their blood, 20% more, according to the CDC. They've yet to say anything about it, though, right? Even after Flint and Sandy, Utah, which is real recent. You guys probably didn't know this, but there's been already cities that had these problems. In 2009 in Thunder Bay, Canada, they added FSA. It reduced the pH of the city's soft water just a few points, but from 7.54 to 7.27, tripled the rate of lead leaching from the pipes. That's a small drop in pH. Look at this in San Francisco, though. They added FSA, the city's soft water. It reduced the pH from 9 to less than 7.5. That's a big one. They had to add caustic soda just to bring it back because it was so bad, so corrosive. We don't hear about this. By the way, there was a study done in 2007 where they were looking at, they wanted to determine how pipes are affected by chlorine and chloramines, right? Because we add chlorine to the water. That is for a good reason. That's to make the water safe to drink. That's different. You're not medicating, you're making it safe. But they looked at that and they wanted to compare that and these silicofluorides and even sodium fluoride to see what the results were. And after they did chlorine flushing, the concentrations were increased from 1 to 2 parts per million. The lead concentrations nearly doubled. They went to about 200 parts per billion. But when they added FSA, the fluorosilicic acid, it jumped to over 900 parts per billion, the lead levels. So Flint was one of the early adopters of water fluoridation. We're going to see a lot more. And I said that back in Reno, and of course they have no procedures to offset that. But look, I was right. So Sandy, Utah. Now this is a little different, in all fairness. Sandy, Utah, February 5th of this past year, they had a big snowstorm. It caused a power outage, which caused a huge amount of fluoride to be dumped immediately into the water at one time. That's what can happen, right? This big tank is hooked up of corrosive acid. You got to pray everything works. And something like a snowstorm, which turns the power off, can cause a glitch. So this thing dumped. It was 150 times the normal level of what they should have had in there. So this was scary, right? But here's what they told the people in the city, right? They said, you know, be careful because your lead might be up a little bit, your copper levels might be up. They never talked about fluoride. So just check this. So run your water 30 minutes, hot and cold, that kind of thing, until the water gets clear, that kind of thing. That's what they told them. And they said it was just a small affected area, you'll be fine. Okay? But you guys, what you don't know is that in the past 47 years, there's been, and you probably won't see it. Oh, yeah, you will see it, right? No, maybe not. Let's see. Yeah, you can. Those are, you're not supposed to read it. That's just to show you the years and the cities of disasters that have happened with fluoride accidents. Some of these are pipes bursting. Some of these are like what Sandy did. Some of these are a tanker spilling over in the city and having to shut off the entire highway because it's so unbelievably caustic. 55 that I know of. There's probably more. So I went way back on this one. I wanted to show you this just because it's interesting, because now we're talking about food, right? 1971, this is the Journal of Air Pollution Control Association, basically about agriculture. And they were saying, what is the pollutant, what's the worst pollutant that we have? And guess what their answer was? Fluoride was the worst pollutant to affect plants and horticulture, and so now we're talking about our food. And by the way, and I don't want to even get into Monsanto, but even, you know, in Austin, where we have a lot of organic, you know, farms and stuff, there's no way they can guarantee that there's not fluoride getting in the food. They can't guarantee there's not seeds flying over Roundup. They just can't guarantee it anymore. So even if you're doing it right, you're spending the money, you're eating organic, you're buying the bottled water and everything, there's still no guarantee you're not getting it. It's better, but no guarantee. Almost done here. This is this is neat. There's a thing called Toxipedia that I found out. This guy, Steve Gilbert, who's a toxicologist, nonprofit organization, he made a very bold statement against water fluoridation, which is kind of huge. So if you get a chance to go to Toxipedia, it's worth looking at. It's like the opposite of Wikipedia. It's actually factual. And for my Canadian friends, mostly the AV guys back there, you guys know that I think they're still dealing with Calgary, right? It still hasn't been resolved. Am I correct, guys? Okay, it's on hold. So watch this. This is game. So Calgary is, in 2011, they stopped water fluoridation, okay? So in February of 2019, the city council and pro-fluoridation has said, you know what, let's refluoridate, because we're seeing problems. Let's add fluoride back. So they hired this group called the O'Brien Institute, right? Which is a really reputable institute for public health. They wanted them to conduct a review on fluoridation. So the O'Brien Institute says, fine, we'll do that. They published their report, and they highlighted the neurotoxic risk posed to the fetus by fluoride. They literally said to them, guys, we're seeing a pretty big effect, actually. So I'm glad you hired us so we could give you the information. Now you can go with it. So what happens? The city council votes 13-1. We don't need their presentation. It's good. We're good. We thought we wanted you, but we're good. So this is kind of the games they play, and I'm going to show you how they play with graphs, too. This is crucial, right? So 38.7% of Canadians have fluoridated water. We're higher than 74 now. We're probably closer to 80. But this decision in Calgary will affect a lot more provinces, towns, whatever. And I know I'm going to say this wrong. It's not odd, but there's a city in Canada you guys may know, or province, where they have the lowest rates of decay, and they're not fluoridated. And I can't remember what it is. I'm sorry. It starts with an O, but they have the lowest rates. And Calgary didn't have rates that were high at all. There are places that are fluoridated with a lot higher rates than Calgary. So to me, you can just look around your area and say, I think we got enough evidence, right? But they didn't. So this is a scary thing here, and it's ongoing, as my Canadian friend said. So I just wanted to show you half the graph. If this was done fancy, and David Kennedy does a beautiful job of showing this, I probably should have stolen his slide, is he kind of breaks it down where he gets this half of the slide off, and he just shows this, and it just goes like that. And what they're showing here is they're saying, and this was a scientist, look at the decay rates going up when Calgary stopped fluoridating. Look at that. Shame on you. Decay went up. Well, let's show the whole slide. That's the whole slide. Come on. For whatever reason, decay was going up a little bit, but it had nothing to do with ending fluoridation, right? You got to follow the whole graph. So those are the games they play. So I've mentioned the Fluoride Action Network a few times. I'm a big fan of them. They do a lot for this, for fighting fluoridation. They disseminate a lot of information. They spend a lot of money going out and fighting all over the world to try to just educate is what it's all about, right? Let's educate people, let them make the right decision. So look at this. Out of 196 nations, only 24 have fluoridation. Over 95% of the world, it's actually 97, is fluoridation-free. 97% of the world doesn't fluoridate. So think about that. 3% does. You think 97% is full of it and the 3% is right? Only 4 of 48 European countries actually fluoridate, less than 2% of the population. So these are 9 groups that I know have dropped off that whole, you know how they show you, because this is a good argument for people who are pro-fluoridation, is they'll say, look at the list of people who back us. And it's a long list, right? All these groups. And some of them just kind of, you get on my list, I'll get on yours. But some of them do back them, right? Well, these are 9 that have gotten off. So these are pretty huge, right? I mean, the Alzheimer's Association, the National Kidney Foundation, this was probably almost 10 years ago now. Down syndrome, it goes on and on. So a lot of them, we got 9, but we got a lot more to go. I think once that list gets really short, that might be enough. So you got a lot of great resources. I mentioned already the fluoride deception. David Kennedy's got a wonderful documentary called Fluoride Gate. I recommend it. This is an awesome thing to watch as well. That was the first book I ever read well, the second book after Weston Price's book. But I read The Aging Factor by John Yamianis, and I had the good fortune. It was funny. I was doing early on in my career, I would do little radio programs just trying to get my name out. And I was on a program with my friend Bill Harshaw, and he was interviewing me. And he goes, hey, we've got a caller in, Griffin. Let's get him on the phone. It's Dr. John Yamianis. And I went, what? Seriously? And he's on the phone. I go, hi, I'm in awe. I can't believe that you're on the phone. He goes, no, it's nice to be on with you. Let's talk about this. For me, that was a nice brush with fame. Professional Perspectives is a cool little DVD that was done years ago, but all these guys are experts for sure on this. And that's the book that was written by Paul Connett, who is the head of the Fluoride Action Network. Brilliant guy. That's it, guys. All right, questions. We got time for questions. Lots of time. Let's get a microphone if you could. Yeah, Jim, will you help me out? Thanks.
The thing that kept coming to my mind is why? Why do they stick to something? I just don't, like, they feel like they should be doing something, but then the data, like, why does the ADA stick with what they, like, why do all these people, what's holding them onto it? That's what I don't understand.
You know, I don't want to go there because, listen, I can tell you for Austin exactly what's going on.
On my shoulder.
What's that? I can tell you what's going on with Austin. So Austin, in 2011, when we were really fighting city council to say, hey, seriously, there's enough science. There's something going on, just turn it off. There's enough science to show that this stuff is dangerous. To me? Or you? Walk away. In 2011, Austin had just received $9 million from the CDC to fund a smoking cessation program, which in Austin is silly. We've been a smoke-free city for 20 years now. But $9 million, Austin didn't want to bite the hand that feeds him, right? That's $9 million. We're already a very flush city, but $9 million is nothing to scoff at. So when you look around, and this is the truth, the smaller towns are the ones that are dropping it because they can't afford it. It costs about $900,000 a year for Austin to fluoridate. Other towns are maybe a little bit less, but somewhere definitely between $500,000 and $1 million to do this. If you're a little small town like San Marcos or Fredericksburg, that's a lot of money. In Austin, it's nothing. It's pennies. They could care less. You can't make that argument. So to get back to your question, I can't say this with any evidence, so I'm not gonna say it. But sometimes you got to follow the money. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't know if that's true or not, so don't quote me on that. I just think that because your question's good. What's the point, right? With Mercury, it's the same thing, right? They've been pushing that for so many years. We even went to them years ago and said, hey, back out as an environmental concern. Forget the health. Just forget that. Just say, you know what? We found that we're dumping it in the water at a high amount, so for environmental reasons, we're going to stop doing those fill-ins. They still wouldn't do it. So I don't know. Yes. It's okay. Just speak loudly. Okay, I'm not an ADA member anymore, but full disclosure, I was for a lot of my career. I haven't been for about 10 years, but I did it. I was fearful a little bit. I thought if I'm paying the dues, I'm a member, right? They'll say you can't be that bad. They'll take care of me. But I stopped going to the meetings. I mean, obviously, there's so many things that I just can't sit and stomach. So no, I haven't been for about 10 years. I think most of us in the academy are not. But some still do. Listen, I mean, when you go out and do things like this, like, I'm not afraid because everything I showed you guys is all science, right? I didn't make any conjecture. I didn't make any statements that I believe. I showed you all science. And that's what this academy is about, right? We're trying to get scientists here to show you the science so that you can make an informed choice after you leave, and you don't have to say, oh, that he's so biased. I am because I have the information. Okay. Any other questions? Speak loudly. That's a great question. Phil Malika might touch on it a little bit this afternoon, but the answer to that simple is no. I mean, your body's going to eliminate. As I said, even the bad stuff, you'll probably eliminate half over time if you assume you're not still ingesting it, right? But fluoride is tenacious. It's tiny. And you just cannot, there's no chelation methods that we know of to pull it out, right? But I will tell you this, and I've seen this in my practice, if you've got a patient that's got Hashimoto's, let's say, the best thing you can say to that patient is whatever else you do, avoid fluoride in all forms. And I mean, get a filter system on your house, get the Berkey filters on your shower, whatever, a whole home system, avoid it. And if you go to a restaurant, you get bottled water that you know is spring water. Just avoid it. Foods like raisins that have high amounts of fluoride, tea, right? Avoid it. And watch what happens with their thyroid levels. Okay, so as I mentioned, if you're going to have a patient gargle or rinse with that, I would say no more than twice a month. I know that sounds like nothing, but it's still very effective. And the reason why is you don't want to take any chances with getting too much iodine exposure. You got to make sure that they're not iodine allergic or shellfish allergic, right? Any major thyroid problems, don't do that because you're going to mess with those levels of iodine. In your office, someone comes in for a cleaning, you assume that they're there every 6 months, 4 months, 12 months, whatever you do. Ask them, are you doing it at home? No, I'm not. Your hygienist can do it right then and there, right? You can apply it, as I said. You can even do a little rinse, like we got a little syringe, we'll put it in the mouth, let them gargle a bit, and you can suction it out, that kind of thing. There is no protocol as far as I do it. I'm just telling you, once to twice a month if they want to gargle at home and spit it out, 10% povidone iodine, and hygienists can apply it as such too. If you've got a person that's going through an acute phase of decay, apply it. Do it yourself in the office. You know, let it sit on the teeth for a while and then rinse it off carefully. That's really the protocol. I mean, there's no, you don't have to do this, every 10 days or whatever. That's too much. What's that? What? Yeah, same thing at home. So they can gargle or rinse with it maybe a couple times a month, right? MI paste. So yeah, so you got to ask those questions, right? You can't just blanketly prescribe that. You got to, look at the ingredients. Again, a milk-derived peptide. Look at to see what's in it. Make sure that there's no ingredients they react with. Listen, that's your due diligence anyway, right? I'm going to call you all now soon to be functional dentist, functional medicine dentist. We got to do that anyway. We got to find out all the information. Ozone, baby. Ozone's going to be the answer. There ain't anybody allergic to oxygen, okay? O3 is amazing. There's so many applications. I know Phil's going to cover this afternoon. We got time. More questions. Challenge me. I'm sorry, I can't hear. Does iodine stain your teeth? Yes, temporarily, though. It's not like the, silver diamine fluoride where it stays. It'll stain you a little bit, but that'll go away, for sure. Got it. Is that working now, the microphone? More questions. Come on, throw them out. It can be on anything, too. Mercury fuel.
Let's get you in the mic, please.
So, are you saying that silver diamine does not work, or it causes so many other problems that it's not worth it?
The latter. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. It does work. 6% fluoride, though, really high amount, and it's going to stain the teeth permanently in some cases. Why? You don't need it. That's my point. So again, if you take nothing else away, you don't need it. Like I tell my patients that I have for 27 years, 26 years, you don't need it for healthy teeth, period. I don't make any qualification, well, you can apply it to, you do not need it. My kids are living examples. My two kids are now 17 and almost 16, never had fluoridated toothpaste their whole life. I tried my best. They were fed well as babies organically. Now as they get older, that's impossible to control. They eat junk sometimes. They eat crap. Sugar sometimes. No cavities. And the reason why is they got a good constitution, right? The way they eat when they're with us is good and healthy, and they've started that way. So their body's pH is nice. It's probably very alkaline. They can take some attacks from time to time. I do it too. You can indulge from time to time. You don't have to live a sugar-free life. Sugar's not the cause anyway, right? We talked about that. It's pH levels, right? It's getting balanced with your microbiome, right? We need to stop being the dentists that say, stop eating sugar. Yes, of course, that'd be wonderful. It's probably not realistic. So let's figure out how to get everything balanced. And so that's a simple answer. Who else? Way back there. Oh, there's one right here.
What would you suggest as SDF alternative? Is there an alternative for SDF?
I gave some already. Ozone.
Oh, sorry.
Iodine, MI paste. I mean, Well, so will those things I mentioned. That's the point. Remember, listen, iodine, I mean, we don't talk about it enough. As I said, it's got a major antibacterial effect, gram-negative and gram-positive, broad spectrum, okay? Antifungal, anti-mycotoxin, which I learned more about that in the past 3 years than I care to share, but you guys are going to hear about it on Friday afternoon. I highly recommend you listen to the last lecture tomorrow afternoon, all about mycotoxins, mold, right? This is on contact, protozoans. Iodine's pretty powerful. Any other questions? Michelle, you got a question? Anybody else? Yeah. Loud. How do I monitor if ozone is working? So Matt kind of asked that earlier. You got to just, your eyes, right? You see the evidence in front of you. So again, you take an x-ray, let's say of a child, you see the size of the lesion. You have to get a good one, right? Like a nice bite wing that's clearly open. You do your ozone applications. I do it, like I said, 5 times, 1 a week, 5 weeks in a row, for whatever. There's no rule. You can do 20 gamma, 30 gamma. It doesn't matter. Just get ozone in between the teeth, right? 30 seconds in each area. You got to have high volume suction like outside the mouth far, just because you don't want them coughing because it's pure ozone, right? You do that, and then you take a bite wing after the 5 weeks, right, and see. How's it look? Then if it looks good, let's just stop for a while. And again, you've had a dietary talk, you've had a flossing talk, right, hopefully, with the parents. And look at them again a month or 2 down the road. Let's take another image. Let's see. 6 months down the road, let's see. To me, we all know this as dentists, right? I assume everybody's treated children at some point, right? Those lesions go so fast in primary teeth, it's ridiculous sometimes. Like you see a tiny little arrow, and a month later, that thing's all the way into the dentin now, and now it's getting close to the pulp. Children's teeth are crazy. They go fast. So how cool if you can catch an incipient lesion, an early one, and do that. And I don't care if you do it. Look, again, charge $10. Charge nothing. I don't care. But if you do that, let's say 10 times, 20 times, whatever it takes, but you get that kid's tooth to fruition when they finally lose it, they never got a filling. Even if they did it 20 times, you charge $10, that's $200 over how much time? Still less than a filling. So, and they kept their tooth. They kept the space. Good. Way in the back, I think. Wait for the mic.
A few years ago in Vegas, there was a presentation, and I don't remember who it was, that said long-term fluoride exposure weakens the dentin, and that they think it's one of the causes of high caries rate in seniors. So along with medications, dry mouth, all the things that we've been taught, they also felt that the long-term exposure to fluoride was a cause. Do you have any papers on that? Anything?
No, that was probably David Kennedy. I'm sure he does. It had to be, but there's not many of us that speak on fluoride. It was probably David Kennedy. Just another reason not to do it, right? Anybody else? Yeah, there's several. There's one right up front here, and there's a lady 2 rows back, too. We got time.
How do you feel about sodium hypochlorite as a mouthwash?
Oh, thank you. That's one I didn't mention. Thank you. Sodium hypochlorite, also a good one. Also good anti-carcinogenic, very good. I don't know the protocol and how often you would do that. I mean, I assume if it's in a mouth rinse that's got other things that make it not so acidic, if you will, or whatever, any effect on the tooth being too strong effect, then you could probably do that all the time. But just applying it like we're talking about, I don't know what the protocol would be, but it absolutely works. That's another one. Thank you very much. Got to add that to the slide. That's exactly right. And if your town is talking about maybe ending fluoridation, you're going to see the ADA come out with a lot of money in your town to show that it's wonderful. And it's a hard fight. I got to tell you, I went to city council one more time because I told people I'm not doing it anymore. It's a waste of my time, my breath. I'm tired of doing it because it's so disheartening to go there and bring even victims, right? You got all these people in the community. I had somebody from this big Hispanic group and other groups that were coming saying, we're all on board with the science. We shouldn't do this. And at the last meeting, this was a couple years ago, there was some young dentists that were there that were pro. And I looked at him and I said, with all due respect, you don't know the science. You're just beginning to get into it. So don't sit there and make a bold statement that it's this wonderful thing until you know what you're talking about. And then I went further and I said, let me tell you why I'm here. And I made this really clear, and I'm still mad to this day that I didn't stand up and scream, but I thought, I'm not going to do that. But I said, and I'm watching the council members, half of them are on their phones while you're talking, right? And I said, listen, let me tell you why I'm here. I said, I'm here for those kids in East Austin who cannot afford to go get bottled water. I have the luxury, this is what I said, I can afford to buy bottled water and I can provide for my kids, but I'm not here for me or for my, I'm here for those, and I made it really clear, right? I thought it was a bold statement. That's who I'm here for. The kids the families who cannot afford to stop drinking tap water. And at the end, City Council, I'm not going to say her name, she goes, well, Dr. Cole, it must be nice that you can afford to do that, but my kids in my district can't. I'm like, what? I just said that. She turned it around on me. And I'm like, are you kidding? And I'm looking around. No one's looking at me going, he just said. I'm like, am I crazy? So I'm done with that. I mean, do your thing in your communities. I applaud your efforts. Do what you can. But I think it's more things like this. We're getting information out, right? If you have a chance to be on a radio program, don't be scared. Just learn enough. You can steal from this thing. You can call me or David Kennedy or whatever. Learn your own. Get on those things. Answer those questions. Don't be afraid to get into a little debate because you got the science behind you. It's easy. You can quote all science. They're the ones that got to come up with these clever ways to say things. It's been around for 70 years. Got to be good.